Before everything changed, I lived in a quiet house. I'm Nancy, and I grew up in what I believe to be the ideal household. Strong, industrious, and always there for me, my dad was the breadwinner. From the food we ate to the affection that united us, my mum, who was kind, maintained everything in order. They appeared to be a match made in heaven, a duo that defied the norms of contemporary partnerships. I admired my father as a child. My hero was him. I used to follow him about the house when I was younger, assisting with small tasks like lawn care, auto repairs, and even the occasional do-it-yourself project he loved to start but never completed. Our relationship stayed close as I got older, but it began to change. Beyond the light-hearted banter we used to exchange, there were more intimate discussions. We discussed everything: life, his aspirations, my prospects, and occasionally topics that seemed a bit too intimate for a father-daughter bond. However, I didn't think it was odd. All I had to do was confide in Dad. Even when my mother was too exhausted or too busy to listen, he was always there for me. I didn't give it much thought until I observed something strange one day, but we had this connection that was different from what I had with her. The Sunday afternoon was calm. Dad and I were alone in the house since my mum had left to go see a friend. That's nothing out of the ordinary. We had previously been alone. However, there was something odd about that day. The way he grinned while speaking and the way he gazed at me. It seemed as though he saw me as more than simply his daughter. I initially dismissed it, telling myself it was all in my head. Dad had always been compassionate and gentle after all. However, as the days passed, minor details began to accumulate. The way his hugs lasted a second longer than they should have, the way he brushed my hair out of my face when I spoke to him, or the way he seemed to be vying for my attention more and more. Nothing untoward ever happened, and it wasn't overt. However, I was unable to fully describe the tension that existed between us. Though slight, it was indisputable. I began to question whether or not I was overanalyzing the situation. Maybe I was only dreaming about this bizarre new dynamic. Still, I had a nagging suspicion that something wasn't quite right. It soon became evident that I wasn't the only person who had seen these changes. My mother had also begun to behave differently. She grew increasingly aloof and kept a close eye on us whenever Dad and I conversed or laughed together. Even though I could see the mistrust rising in her eyes, I didn't think anything was amiss. But the mood in our home was shifting. The formerly cozy and affectionate setting was growing tense with silent exchanges and longing looks. Despite my desire to maintain normalcy, I felt trapped in a situation that I didn't fully comprehend. The tension in our home grew as the weeks went by. My dad looked more and more attracted to me in ways that were difficult to describe, while my mom's aloof looks became icy silences. Small, hardly indiscernible actions like him standing a bit too close during our conversations or making up reasons to be around me when there wasn't a good reason to do so were examples. I was uneasy, but I continued to ignore my emotions. This was my father, after all. He wouldn't do anything wrong, would he? My mother suddenly got up one evening after supper and declared she was leaving. My dad and I didn't question her leaving without informing us where she was going, even though it wasn't typical of her. I saw the shift in Dad's attitude as soon as the door shut behind her. He proposed that we watch a movie together and appeared relaxed, almost delighted. I tried to be regular, but there was something different about spending time alone with him now, as if there were an invisible barrier between us that was slowly being removed. I could feel his gaze on me as we sat on the couch with the movie playing in the background. It made me feel self-conscious, but not in the manner a parent would typically observe his kid. I had no idea what was causing my heart to race. I tried to ignore the increasing unease in the room by keeping my eyes fixed on the television. Dad suddenly reached out and touched my shoulder. It felt weighty, but it was a harmless enough gesture. I could feel the warmth of his touch soaking through my flesh as his fingers lingered. Unsure of how to respond, I tensed up. Instead of shifting his hand, he turned to face me, his face closer than it had ever been. "Nancy," he began in a quiet, almost uncertain voice. "You are aware that I am always available to you?" I nodded, but my voice felt constricted. "You can talk to me about anything." There was something odd about the way he stated it. I wanted to think he was simply being the kind father I had always known, but in my heart, a part of I was no longer so certain. Is everything all right? In an attempt to return the conversation to normal, I asked. His eyes searched mine for a long time, as though he was trying to make up his mind. Then he withdrew his hand and grinned as fast as the tension had increased, a grin that fell short of his eyes. Of course, he responded, suddenly getting to his feet. I'm heading to the garage to see how things are going. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until he left the room. My thoughts were racing. Was this all in my head? Did I interpret innocent situations too much? I shook my head in an attempt to clear my mind of any uncertainties. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't deny the odd feeling that we were on the verge of something wrong or the way my body responded any time he was close. I kept going over what had happened that evening in my head as I laid in bed that night. I didn't want to think that something improper was taking place. Dad hadn't done anything, at least not explicitly. However, I had a gut sensation that something was changing, and it wasn't in a good way. Mom was even more aloof the following morning. She spoke to me in brief, clipped sentences and hardly spoke to Dad. She seemed to be aware of something, but unprepared to face it. From the corner of my eye, I saw her observing me, her expression stiff with unasked inquiries. As the days went by, it became increasingly clear how far apart my parents were. They hardly touched or showed affection, and they spoke less. It seemed as though the home was closing in on itself after being filled with light and laughter. I didn't know how to stop the relationship's flaws from getting worse. Then, one afternoon, when my dad was at work, my mother came up to me. Her voice was unusually gentle and her face was taut with concern. Nancy. After a moment of hesitation, she started. Have you had any recent interactions with your father? Is there anything odd? I went cold. Her inquiry felt like a kick to the stomach. Was there something she was accusing me of? Did she believe I was acting improperly? As I searched for the appropriate words, my thoughts raced. No, Mother, nothing is happening, I said hastily, not sure if that was totally accurate. Although nothing had occurred, there was undoubtedly a problem. We were both aware of it. She gave me a long look as though she was attempting to determine whether or not I was being honest. She nodded and sighed at last, but I could tell by her look that she wasn't quite convinced. All right, she said softly. I only wanted to confirm. I felt a heavy burden descend in my chest as she left. Our family's fractures were more than just superficial. They threatened to destroy us, and they were right there in full view. I also had a sneaking suspicion that something awful was about to happen. After my mom's silent confrontation, the days that followed were like being in a pressure cooker. My mom's distancing became blatant avoidance, and my dad became even more protective and suffocating. We had ceased to be a family. In a home full of invisible obstacles and unsaid words, we were three strangers. The weight of my mother's unspoken charges and my father's actions left me caught between them. After that, one night, everything fell apart. I had already gone to bed, and it was late, long after dinner, when I heard my parents in the living room, speaking in quiet, irate tones. I initially attempted to ignore it, covering my head with the covers in the hopes that their quarrel would go away like it always did. My stomach knotted with dread, though, as the tension in their words continued to draw me in. Slipping out of bed, I crept to my bedroom door and opened it slightly to listen to the conversation. The silence of the night was broken by their sharper, more distinct voices. You don't think I understand what's happening? Despite the coldness of her voice, my mother's fury was trembling beneath it. You have been avoiding me and acting strangely around her. Do you believe that I am blind? Stop it, Linda. You're exaggerating the situation. My father answered in a more composed but defensive tone. She is our daughter. Nothing is taking place. Richard, don't tell me lies, my mother retorted, her voice trembling with rage. I've seen the way she looks at you, and I've seen how you look at her. My heart fell. Was I involved in this? In her opinion? That any of this was what I wanted? Dad emphasized, his voice suddenly quiet, almost begging, that I would never hurt her. You are familiar with me. It's not like that, even if I love her. Not in that way. The voice of my mother broke. It's not normal and it's not right, but I don't know you anymore, and I don't know what's been going on between you two." My chest constricted as I heard the sobs in her voice. It was this. This was the while everything was breaking down. Before things worsened, I knew I had to put an end to it. I left my room without giving it much thought and headed towards the living room down the hallway. They both turned to face me as I walked up, their features frozen in a mixture of astonishment and shame. My voice was hardly more than a whisper when I said, "Mom, Dad, stop," yet it sliced through the tension like a dagger. Nothing has occurred. Neither Dad nor I have done anything. My mother's eyes furrowed in sorrow and distrust. "But Nancy, don't you realize that something is amiss?" You also sensed it. I paused, and it seemed to validate her worst suspicions. The betrayal was evident in her eyes, and it caused me unexpected pain. "I'm not sure what's going on," I said, trembling. "It's not what you think, though. Dad and I were simply—" I hesitated, trying to find the proper words, but they eluded me. My dad remained silent as he stood there, seemingly aware that there was nothing he could do about it. His eyes were hollow with regret, and his face was pale. He had the appearance of someone who has lost everything without even recognizing it. Mom took a step towards me, her voice shaking with emotion. "I love you, Nancy, but I can't deny what I've witnessed. There's something that shouldn't be between you two. It's not acceptable, but it's also not your fault." My eyes filled with tears. "This is not what I intended to happen. I have no idea what's going on." That was the reality. I hadn't requested the unusual bond that had developed between my father and me. It wasn't what I wanted. Now, though, it was ruining everything. Dad talked for the first time that evening. "I didn't mean for any of this, Linda, please. Both of you are loved by me. However, things have been strange, and I'm not sure how we ended ourselves here." With a steady but sad voice, my mother shook her head. "Richard, it's too late. I no longer have faith in you. I no longer have faith in this family." Like a final verdict, her words lingered in the air. I felt as though I was suffocating beneath the weight of a reality that I didn't completely comprehend as it all fell apart around us. My mother packed her things and left the house in the days that followed. She didn't even turn around or say goodbye. She seemed to have been grieving the loss of our family for a long time before she left. My dad tried to explain and apologize, but he was at a loss for words. No amount of words could mend the shattered parts of our life. The damage had already been done. After that, I spent some time with my dad, but things were never the same. Even though neither of us was entirely sure how or why, the unsaid tension that had existed between us for months was now a permanent fixture, a reminder of the invisible boundary that had been crossed. Desperate to get away from the burden of the past, I eventually moved out. My mom never truly forgave me, and my relationship with my dad remained tense, or him, or the circumstances. A quiet that spoke more than any dispute ever could took the place of our previously tranquil home. And during that quiet, I came to the realization that loud, overt betrayals aren't always the things that ruin a family. Occasionally, it's the subtle, silent fissures that are overlooked until it's too late to fix them. The agony of what transpired subsided throughout the years, but it never completely disappeared. Following my parents' divorce, I was left in the midst of an unbridgeable chasm. I made an effort to leave the shadows of that damaged household behind and start a new life. But occasionally, I would catch myself reflecting on those times, the unspoken goal, the things that were not uttered, and I would question whether there was anything I might have done better. I never mentioned that night to my father again. Of course, we still communicate, but we are now separated by a barrier that will never be overcome. Even though my mom and I are on good terms, there is still a persistent distrust and a sense of betrayal that hasn't completely gone away in our relationship. Ultimately, our family disintegrated due to the gradual deterioration of trust rather than a spectacular affair or overt betrayal. The lines between us were hazy, and something vanished in that area. We would never be able to get it back. Maybe that's the true tragedy of it all. It was the love we were unable to maintain, not the affair that never took place.